My name is Eric Van Horn. I bought my first franchise in my 20s, and since then, I've owned 6 brands with 25 stores in 8 states. I've also helped 1,000 people find the right franchise for them. People like us who are not cut out for the 9 to 5 and like to work smarter, not harder. How do we find the right franchise, buy it, grow it, sell it, and how do we do it in a way to own the business without it owning us? Those are the questions, and I'm on a mission to give you the answers. Welcome to Franchise Secrets. Welcome to the Franchise Secrets podcast with your host, Eric Van Horn, here with today's guest, Christy Wilson Delk, and she is the author of Adventures in Franchise Ownership. And I'm excited to have her on today because we're going to be talking about things like what to do when bad things happen. And what a great time to talk about that. My personal locations are closed down right now, and whether yours are or aren't, bad things are happening right now. And then we're also going to dive into strategic leadership, and we might get into a few more things as well. But Christy, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So why don't you give the audience a little bit of your background so they know who we're talking to today?
My primary background is as a franchise owner. I was a franchisee for Kids Are Kids Academy for 15 years in Orlando, Florida. So my chunk of ownership experience comes from that. Prior to that, I was in corporate sales and marketing in industries that no longer really exist. And I currently am a professor at Rollins College. In fact, I give my students extra credit if they can show me that they listen to our podcast, Eric.
I like that. Well, hello, students of Christy. I'm glad. I like that. So you went from a franchisee. When did you write the book, and why did you write a book?
I published it in October 2018. It's an arduous journey publishing a book. You know, it's a learning experience for sure. But I did not start writing it until after I had sold probably maybe a year and a half or 2 years. I started. And the reason I did is because I learned from going to franchise conferences and talking to people in our wonderful industry that to really, be able to make your mark and to help others. And we know our industry is really all about helping others find success, find personal fulfillment, all those things, is that, Christy, you should write a book. So being in the childcare industry, automatically, you can imagine there are a lot of stories. But what I learned going around and talking to folks and doing some speaking was that, everybody's got stories. And I started collecting some great ones from some top performers in other segments and decided, you know what? I don't see anything out there that really speaks to the franchisee, which the better and smarter and more resilient they become, the better it is for everybody.
That's why Brian Holmes and he's a franchisee, a good buddy of mine. We started the Franchise Story podcast to start getting stories out there for franchisees and franchisors. So we went a different route. We just did a podcast just because we were like, we have such incredible conversations with franchisees. We should probably just be sharing that. And so you did that in the book format, which is awesome. Like, what are some of the brands that some of these franchisees are with that are in your book?
Yeah, there are like maybe 20 segments. There's more than that, but I tried to replicate the percentages. So Great Clips, Firehouse Subs, other food, edible arrangements.
Yep.
Bright Star Cares.
Yep, with Shelly Sun. You've got a variety of industries in there. So the book is called Adventures in Franchising. People, I'm sure they can just get it on Amazon. So you sold your franchise, wrote a book, and I have friends that help people write books. I don't know how you did it, but just a quick little side note. Tucker Max, he's a friend. He has a company called Scribe Media. His company did David Goggins' book. So he does that. Another friend, Chandler Bolt, has self-publishing school, and it's basically kind of DIY. So if anybody's out there thinking about a book, those are 2 friends of mine that are doing it out there. But so I'm glad you wrote the book. You sold your franchise, wrote the book, and now let's dive into what to do when bad things happen. We're in that right now. My businesses are shut down. Bad things are happening. What do I do?
Bad things are happening. the premise of the book is that it's a framework for running your business, with building layers of loyalty, strategic leadership, and a couple other things we'll get into. But I specifically named a chapter in strategic leadership, what to do when bad things happen, dot, 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 because they will happen. Assume you've been through something yourself. But until you go through something as dramatic and as traumatic as this, you don't realize the personal fortitude you have and perhaps the resilience that you have and the flexibility you need to develop. So I went through quite a few things. 9/11, 2008 recession. I mean, before that, there were a couple of things. I'm in Florida. We have hurricanes.
Storms.
I know, storms, 3 back-to-back hurricanes when I first opened. So I knew
Oh,
that things happened. And what I learned was that, and I read a couple of books that helped me get there, was that you got to focus on the things you can control.
100%.
100%. It definitely is peace of mind. But as a leader, that's what you really have to do. Being able to understand and accept that premise, you're not going to be able to control everything. That gives you really a launch pad to start planning and to start building or cementing loyalty, to start thinking about some programs or different ways that you can do business now. But guess
Yep.
what? It leads into a different way of doing it in the future.
For sure. When you were in business and I didn't go through 9/11 in business. I was in Norway when
Oh,
that
wow.
happened. And so I got stuck in Norway for a little bit. So that's where I was when it happened. But I mean, you've been through, like you said, storms and different bad things. So what are some of those things where that happened to you that you pulled out some of these lessons from? Like any specific examples?
Sure. Well, we could talk about 9/11. So immediately what you want to do is channel your communication
Hmm.
modes. As a franchisee today, you don't want to start testing things that you have not developed prior to today. So we talk about strategic leadership for unplanned and for planned. So for planned, you might want to test communication modes so that you know for sure you
Hmm.
can talk to your employees in different ways. You can talk to your clients in different ways, the ways that reach them best. So I developed and right then had lots of different ways that I communicated. So that was one.
So I think like in today's environment, it's fluid right now, but I'm always trying to be 1 or 2 or 3 steps ahead of the average business owner out there. And so I was doing things 2 weeks ago that people were doing last week. I'm doing things
Good.
this week that people probably aren't doing in my businesses. Like I am in full on offensive mode right now. I shored everything up the first week. Last week I was helping everybody else shore things up. And this week I'm offensive. And if there's things that I still need to do to shore things up or to make things more robust, then I'll do it. But like before, we needed to everyone should have been thinking, what do I do if I do go remote in 2 weeks? Because no one was really thinking that. They're thinking, maybe I might get shut down, I might not. But what do you do when you need to go remote? Do that before you actually need to make that decision. Have that plan in place. And so I just saw a lot of entrepreneurs not really taking things as serious, whether they thought it was going to happen or not. We as entrepreneurs should be having a best case scenario, a likely scenario, and a worst case scenario, and not just give all of our attention to one. We need to have a plan for that worst case scenario. If my store shuts down, what am I going to do? And we started to do that even before the store shut down. So I just wanted to that's what we're dealing with right
That's
now.
exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. So in the book, of course, that was written, a year and a half ago. What I talk about specifically is think about, in fact, I say, all right, I'm going to be the one to tell you, think about the 5 worst scenarios that can happen in your business. And I listed what mine were. And in that business, they included some pretty bad things.
Yes. Things that you don't want to go there in your mind, but you should as a leader.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. And then I say, pick 2. Start to tackle those this year. See what your franchisor is doing on that. See what others in the industry are doing on that. Form a little
Mm-hmm.
committee. You don't have to do it all yourself. Get people involved and have ownership. So nobody saw this coming, but guess what? Nobody ever sees any of these horrible
Mm-mm.
things
That's
coming.
it.
But getting these things, just like you said, tackling them head on. Maybe number one is I want to make sure I can talk to everybody, in the best way that they are going to be reached. That could be one. The other is like, okay, up in your neck of the woods, you don't get tornadoes, do you?
We rarely do, but it's happened. I go mountain biking a lot, and there are areas deep in the forest
Oh,
that
wow.
have been completely wiped out by tornadoes. But does that ever happen? No, but it did last year.
Oh, wow. Well, we used to do a tornado drill, and that's not the thing you worry about in Florida. But if one happened in a crazy afternoon storm, I wanted to make sure that my staff knew exactly what to do. So I said, this year we're going to put together a tornado plan and we're going to have a practice twice a year. Okay. And then there's others, but they're a little morose, that have to do with children and bands and things like that.
Yeah, whatever it is for you. Christy, I'm on the board of a school, and we have to go down that. And some people get uncomfortable, like, oh, I don't want to think about that. Then school shootings happen.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I guess this is okay to let your mind go there. And so I'm a big fan of, not focusing on that, but definitely you've got to plan for worst case scenarios. You don't live there, but you've got to plan for it.
Yeah. And in the book, I include worksheets. I mean, I have exercises in the book, but I decided because I've been doing, a few audio opportunities and interviews like this. So I have some free resources online if somebody wants to get started on what they should be doing and planning of being a strategic leader, but planning for things in the future. And it's strictly for listeners. And if they go to Christy Wilson Delk, that's capital C, Christy, it doesn't have to be capital, but Christy with a C, H, Wilson, and then Delk with a D /listeners. They'll have access for those worksheets that I think can help them get started. So they can't be afraid. You got to jump in.
Yep, and we'll put a link on that. So on this podcast, Christy, I like helping people as well. So if there's anything that I can help people. And it happened to me when I was with on the John Lee Dumas podcast. I've been on his Entrepreneur on Fire podcast twice now. And the first time I was a rookie. I mean, it was my first podcast ever. And I'm on one with a ton of listeners. And I'm like, go to www.ilovefranchising.com. He's like, Eric, why did you just say www. He's like, nobody does that. Always remember that. But for you, so you had to spell out your name and whatnot. I wouldn't even do that. I would just have a domain name that directs them to yourname.com / blah, blah, blah. Just get a simple thing that just is like a really simple thing to say. Franchise free resource or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Mine's like franchise playbook, something super simple like that. Little piece of advice there.
Okay.
That way you can just quickly say it. People will remember it. And this is good for anybody out there. If you are giving anything it's a lead magnet, right? So people will go find something that you give something of value to free. All you franchise owners should be having something of value to give for free to people. And you should be able to have your audience be able to go there quickly and get it, whatever that is. So like for me, I have a Facebook group I changed the name to Franchise Tribe because I want it to be really simple for people to get into. And so instead of like saying, go to Facebook and type in blah, 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 I'm like, just go to franchisetribe.com. And then I just have the Franchise Tribe like sign in right there. So it just redirects it. So anyway, a little tangent that may or may not be good advice for you. I'll let you be the judge of that.
I think it is. I just came out with those maybe a month ago because I just wanted people to have access to them without having to commit to a book or what if I don't want to go to your website,
Exact. So good. I'm glad you did that. Let me know when you get your domain and then I'll post it so people can go to it really easily.
Okay. Will do.
Hey, it's Eric here. I hear from a lot of people that they're looking to buy their first brand or maybe their second or third brand, and they're not sure where to start or they're not sure if they're looking in the right places. Well, that's where I come in. I help people find really good brands. And if you're thinking about your second or third or maybe your first brand, let's set up a time to talk. You can go to talkwitheric.com. That's ERIK, talkwitheric.com. Now back to the show. Going back, so some free resources for people. And I wanted to just touch base on this. So I've just got this franchise Facebook group called Franchise Tribe. You can go to franchisetribe.com and join, but it's only for franchisees. And in there, I posted this the other day. It's called Gray to Black Planning. It was like kind of this paper that somebody wrote that was part of Entrepreneurs Organization. They created this kind of this planning because they were in 20 years in their business. They went through 2 major recessions and several minor ones. And their first major downturn was in 2001. And then they had, with 9/11. And then their second one was in 2008. And they approached them very differently. And their approach was different and the results were different. And so they just went through that and kind of like the big picture for mitigation planning. And they go through like 6 steps and then they just go through it. So this is the kind of thing that you as owners can be doing right now, and you can delegate this to your team because they're not working with customers. They're not doing all this stuff because nobody's really working right now.
Yeah.
So get projects like that and like what you're talking about, Christy, for them to be working on.
That's exactly what I keep thinking. What if I own my business today? What would I be doing? And I know exactly what I'd be doing. I'd be doing these kinds of planning because these are opportunities to do that. The other thing that I think is strategic is to think about your competitive advantage. Do you truly have a competitive advantage this year? And look at your competition as they were 2 weeks ago or a month ago. Look even outside your industry for ideas, or your segment, I should say, and get something that your clients really truly value and figure out how to bring it to them and your staff, both sides of that equation. And that is an excellent thing to be working on right now. It might be a new program, some sort of value added service, something that you may want to strategically contact some of your sweet spot clients and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. Can I run it past you?
I like that. I mean, like what else? Like what else would you be working on right now? Like, I think KPIs, we look at your current KPIs. Are they the way that you want them to be? Should you be looking at anything different? Like what else would you say people could be doing right now that when business is booming or they're growing or they're, in acquisition mode that they really don't have the time to do? What else would you say you should be focusing on this?
It might surprise you, but if we think about business right now, if you haven't been planning and doing all these wonderful things that we are talking about, you're going up and you're going down. You're up and you're down, peaks and valleys. So my approach that I learned was about smoothing out the terrain. And a big chunk of that has to do with knowing your numbers. Dive deep into your reports now. You probably have more reports that you've never looked at in your operating system that your franchisor has given you, that this is the time to look at it. How can you maximize your payroll? How can you maybe minimize the number of vendors that you're using? What services can you combine? I recommend doing that once a year. And that's very clear in my book, which has a lot of really actionable ideas in there. But I talk about 3 levels of knowing your numbers: knowing where to find them and knowing what they are. Okay, great. That's level 1. Level 2, how do they interact in terms of your revenue, your top line, your bottom line, what the percentage is, vis-a-vis your franchise top performers, vis-a-vis your industry. And level 3, and that's where I want you to be, projection. This is going to go down. What's going to happen? What do I need to do to get this up?
Level 2, like tactically, what is that right now for most people? What would they be tactically doing right now to be level 2?
Okay. So let's say your franchisor says payroll at, I'm just going to throw out a number that we used to talk about. Maybe it's 45% of your revenue. So you look at that and you go, wait a minute, I'm at a higher number than that. Where am I overstaffed? Where am I understaffed? What other things could I do that would, maybe somebody wants a couple hours in the middle of the afternoon to go pick up their kids or go to the gym. Who might be open to flexibility to reduce your payroll? At the very least, you ought to be hitting those franchise numbers. If you're too low, you should be doing something else.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, like right now, people are ready to talk. Like in this environment where people are at home, everyone's like, the business owners are homeschooling their kids and looking for an excuse to looking for an excuse to get on the phone call. That's why I've scheduled so many Skype calls and podcasts over these days because my wife is upstairs homeschooling our three little ones. She's doing a fantastic job, by the way. She's like doing really, not all the time is it like great, but she really is amazing at that, and I love what she's doing. I would rather be down here talking to people like you. There are your top performing franchisees in whatever system you're in are probably looking for an excuse to talk to somebody right now.
Yeah.
The really good ones, they're like me. They've shored everything up. Now they're like not twiddling their thumbs, but they're not watching the news. They're probably talking to smarter people than them because that's what smart people do. They talk to smarter people than themselves. That's what I do.
Like that.
And I bring in guests that are smarter than me so I can get to know them and they level me up. My advice with that, reach out to these franchisees that you can never get a hold of because you don't know them or they're too busy to talk to you. But you're not at their level yet. Reach out to them, learn from them, and then ask them their numbers and see if they're at a 45 and you're at a 55% in payroll. Find out from them, how do you get to that? Did you ever struggle with that? What are the key levers to look at with that? And whatever those KPIs are, whether it's marketing or payroll or retention, whatever it is, now is the time to learn from people like that. So like that's me right now. I'm reaching out to I'm having my managers reach out to some of the smart people that are in the franchises that I own and learn from them, learn from the other managers. So because nobody has time to really do that. And that's the thing they should be doing to grow their business. So anyway, that's tactically like what I would advise people to do, to go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3.
Level 3 and the projection. If I invest an extra $6,000 in marketing this year, how is that going to affect my profit margin? My bottom line. How is that going to affect my top line? Yes. How is that going to affect my bottom line? So once you start knowing how that works, and you don't need to know all of them, maybe there's 3 or 4 that you want to be really, really intimate with. I mean, I think it should be that way. Then you're in a really powerful position. You're in control.
What are the mistakes that people make in knowing their numbers? What are the things that you see in general that people should be focusing on? In the fitness industry, it's retention. That's one of the things that everyone needs to be focused on in that industry. Like, what are the numbers that you see as some of the most common mistakes and the easiest to move?
Yeah. So a couple of them. I talk about mining your metrics for revenue gold. And one of them is about not just looking at the top line, but how can you create more efficiencies? We always look at payroll, but there are many other things you can look at. Like I talked about combining services. So my recommendation is that once a year, in the beginning of the year, on a Sunday, whatever day works for you, but I was pretty religious about doing that at least once a month, but I had an annual meeting with myself. I looked at all my vendors. I figured out which ones did I really need to approach and say, what can you do with my contract amount or what additional value can you give me? So you should be doing that with all your vendors for sure.
And right now, especially, it's Sunday for like who knows how long. We're in lockdown mode. So yeah.
So that's one. But another one, then I got this from a Great Clips. There's a great story from a European wax franchisee, multi-unit fella in California that talked about keeping the mice at bay, the mice that chomp away little by little by little. And that's what he's talking about, efficiencies and the things you say, whatever, that's the copier. Yep. Well, guess what? But the other thing is using some money to put together a really good incentive program for different levels of staff. And you're going to spend a little money to do that. But Great Clips franchisee, another multi-unit owner, had a program that she shared very generously with me called Get on the Boat. And I think she had 11 units. So it wasn't even just her managers she was challenging, but the shift managers. And what did she challenge them to do? It wasn't just top line, Eric. It was, let's look at retention. Let's look at this. Let's look at that. teach them. This is career development for them.
Yep.
They love that stuff. Design a program, and that will help grow your business, top and bottom line.
Here's a curveball for you. Why are you thinking about getting into another franchise? Have you ever thought about jumping back into ownership?
Every time I go to an expo, I think about it, and I'm always tempted. I know. I love the business model. Love it, love it, love it. When I exited 15 years, I had expanded twice. We didn't really
Mm-hmm.
get into this, but when I sold my franchise, it was primarily an asset sale.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what by that is usually what will the bank lend money on? And thankfully, it was a well-planned exit and I did well. So I'm enjoying the benefits of having some money work for me. I wanted to head in a slightly different direction, and that was in the education mode. I've always thought I would enjoy teaching at the college level, and so I wanted to try that. And I started off part-time, ended up full-time, and now I'm back to part-time because I really didn't want to do it full-time. Yeah. So, but it's tempting. I see franchises and I am very tempted. However, I'm working on other areas of my life
Mm-hmm.
now, health, wellness, family.
Tell me about it. We get into business because we think we want to work on these areas. We do it for the freedom when we have a goal, and it's not just money. But what happens, a lot of people reach that money goal, but then they have a new money goal and they forget why they got into it. So I think it's an interesting conversation because now you're working on other things. And I think that, people right now are probably thinking, why did I get into business? I got into it, make more money. Well, now my business isn't worth as much today as I thought it was. And they're either thinking I'm going to double down or they're thinking I'm just going to walk away. I mean, those are both, choices that they have to make, but I don't like it when I see entrepreneurs just trying to just go after more money, because that's not fulfilling at the end of the day. And there are things of why we got into business that are really important. So, just personally, would be interested to know, what are you doing that now that you are enjoying working on besides just making money?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful, beautiful question. And you asked John Hewitt, and he said it's the give back.
Yep.
It's not the money. And I think it's really important to recognize, when you've hit a certain level, if that's a good level for you,
Yep.
it's all personal, then what else will be fulfilling? So for me, wellness is huge. In fact, I have a little thing in the book about why it's so important. And I
Mm-hmm.
share a pretty vulnerable couple of stories about times when I wasn't taking such good care of myself. And it just doesn't pay. Your
Mm-mm.
health is the most important thing. And once you start to achieve some balance with your family, you don't have to sacrifice your
Mm-mm.
relationship
Nope.
to run a successful business. And if you want the joy and the freedom to be able to make choices in the course of a month and have the downtime. But it does get into your skin, at some level, you got to really check that workaholicness.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there.
Were you? How many hours a week were you working at the peak in your peak workaholicness?
Well, I wasn't always there, but I was always thinking about it.
Mentally.
So 60?
That's a lot. I know some
Yeah,
people in corporate America that are working 80. I'm
I
talking to
know.
my
I
man
don't know how
doing
they
that
do it.
next week. It's killing him. But
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it's corporate America where you are getting paid per hour or it's your business, especially if it's mentally on your mind. If you go to bed thinking about business and you're dreaming about business and this first thing that you think about in the morning, then probably a realization you need to stop. You need to
Yeah.
make some shifts. And this is a perfect time to do it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it is.
Make that shift in your business, especially as we're going into a time of higher unemployment. You're going to be able to pick up talent and it's not going to be easy. None of this is easy, but
No.
this is a good time to think what do you want your life to look like? And I just had a good buddy of mine on Facebook Live, and I'll probably turn it into a podcast in the group, but he has a journal called Be Fulfilled Journal, and he gave it away to the audience. So if anyone here wants it, it's BeFulfilledJournal.com, and the code to get it for free is Franchise Tribe. journal through this whole thing. Think about the past. And like, when I say this thing, I mean the things that we've been going through right now through coronavirus. So think about what you were doing. And as you would think about like, what would you have changed in the past year? Journal about that, write it down. And then what you want to change, because now's the time where you can start to strategically make those changes. And it's just a natural time to do it, because we're like, what's really important to us? So whatever that is that's important to you, that's more important than money, like go after that.
Yeah, that's a perfect message. One of the issues that I would have when I had my annual heart to heart, which is exactly what I called it, with myself, your annual meeting with yourself, is what is standing in the way from your business being what you want it to be, and from you being what and who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the examples I shared was, there was a time when I was so stressed. I was trying to be a mom. I was trying to be a great employer. I was trying to be all these things. And guess what? One night, and I share this in the book, so I'll share this with your audience, I went out with a bunch of girlfriends for a 50th birthday party, had too much to drink and got pulled over. And I realized I can't be everything to everybody. And so what I realized was I needed to pull back. And so I've always exercised and enjoyed that kind of wellness, but I hired a college student to start helping me with my son. So I was raising him on my own and running this business and trying to be a good girlfriend and, ridiculous. Yeah, ridiculous. And there's a Pillar to Post franchisee that I was interviewed in the book. Jeff Mackey is his name. He shared a heartfelt story about he had some major health issues as a result of working. And I gave you a hint. It was a heartfelt story. And that's when he changed his life. Don't wait till something bad happens. Have that heart to heart. What do you need to do different? And you have time to think about it right now.
That's for sure.
It's a great time to set the reset.
And I think going back to your story where you had too much to drink, you left and you got pulled over, I would imagine most people at some point probably could be pulled over and in the breathalyzer, like fail that because it doesn't take a lot. And so anybody could really find themselves in that situation. And don't wait till that happens. Because I have a friend that happened to. They didn't have a drinking problem, but they just made, they're like, oh, and then it was a big wake up call to them. So, but just use opportunities that come up around you to change the things that you don't like about what you were doing or the way that you were doing it, even in your business right now. Christy, any last bits of wisdom that you have for the crew?
I think if listening to this from the perspective of, oh gosh, and this is one of the first major challenges you've had in your business, then know you'll get through it.
Yep.
You will get through it. And people like Eric and most everybody else in the franchise world that has experience under the belt will tell you the same thing, but learn from it. Be better to yourself, be better at running your business, be more open to your franchise system, contacts, allow it to change you and just focus on those things you can control. And don't shirk away from the hard things.
Yep.
That is the stuff that really gets you leaps and bounds ahead and in that top maybe 20%.
Yep. As you guys are out there, great advice. As you guys are out there thinking about what to do next, and I've been talking about diversification in different podcasts and different things. If you guys wonder what's out there and you're a franchisee, just join the franchise tribe. If you're just thinking about like researching franchise, I have another one for franchise buyers, and we'll put the link in there as well. And it's just people that they're not ready to buy, that they just want to research. So I got 2 different groups for that. And I need to take my own advice and get a domain that redirects them to the franchise buyers group, Christy. So I'm taking action on my own advice here. So, hey, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it and enjoyed it as well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.